Think about last night. You climbed into bed, you laid down, you closed your eyes, and then morning. Somewhere in between, 8 full hours just vanished. Not faded, not blurred, not some foggy half memory you can almost grab. Gone. Pure cut to black. 1 second you were lying there, maybe thinking some random nonsense, and the next thing you know, the alarm is going off. You don't remember the last thought that crossed your mind. You don't remember your eyes getting heavy that final time. You don't remember crossing the line. It just happened, and you weren't there for it. You've done this tens of thousands of times. A third of your entire life has disappeared like that, and still nothing, not a single trace. This question sounds almost too simple until you actually sit with it. Then the answer makes your own brain feel way weirder than you ever expected. Let's dig into what actually happens in those last 3 to 5 minutes of your waking mind. You've done this your entire life, tens of thousands of times, and still not one single memory of the actual moment you fell asleep. Not a flicker, not a last frame, nothing. We're about to walk into some of the strangest corners of your own brain, places most people never even know exist. Your brain doesn't just drift off. It actively starts taking apart the very system that records experience while you're still half awake. There's a whole hidden phase called hypnagogia that almost every single one of us slips through every night. Wild stuff happens in there, and by morning, completely wiped. After this, the next time you lie down, you're gonna feel a little uneasy, but also kinda amazed, because once you see what your brain is really doing in those final minutes, the mystery doesn't get smaller. It gets so much weirder. Let's start with what's physically happening inside your head the second you begin to fall asleep, because it's way more dramatic than most people ever realize. Every single hour you're awake, your brain is burning energy like crazy. And as a byproduct of all that burning, it pumps out this chemical called adenosine. Adenosine just keeps building up, slowly, steadily, like a bar tab you can't close until bedtime. The longer you stay up, the higher that tab climbs. And it's not just sitting there quietly, It's actively slamming the brakes on your brain's arousal systems, making you feel heavier, foggier, more desperate to just lie down. That's why a long day leaves you wiped. And here's the funny part about caffeine. Coffee doesn't actually give you energy. It just blocks the adenosine receptors so your brain can't read the "you're exhausted" signal. You're not more awake. You're just temporarily stopping your brain from knowing how tired it really is. Which is kinda wild when you're on your 4th cup of the day pretending you're totally fine. At the same time, your internal 24-hour clock is winding down. That little clock in your hypothalamus starts dialing back the stay alert signals. Melatonin rises, body temperature drops a little. The whole chemistry of your brain starts tipping, away from being awake towards sleep. Then a neurological switch gets flipped. A small cluster of neurons starts actively suppressing everything that keeps you conscious. They quiet the signals that keep you sharp. Your brain literally talks itself off the ledge of being awake. And right in the middle of all that, something critical happens to your thalamus. This is where the memory part starts making sense. Your thalamus is basically the relay station of your brain. Everything you see, hear, feel, sense, it all has to pass through there first before it reaches your cortex. It's the reason you can hear a noise and actually notice it. The reason you can feel the sheets against your skin and know what that feeling is. But when you fall asleep, the thalamus just closes the gate. It starts cutting off the flow of sensory information to the cortex. Your phone buzzing across the room, a car going by, the hum of the AC. None of it gets forwarded upstairs anymore. Your cortex, the part that handles conscious experience and memory formation, starts getting starved of input. And without input, it can't really form new memories in any coherent way. This is already most of the answer right here. You can't remember falling asleep because the very process of falling asleep is your brain actively dismantling its own ability to record experience. The thalamus stops relaying, the cortex goes quiet, the memory encoding machinery shuts down, before you're even fully unconscious. It's like trying to film a video on a phone whose battery is dying in real time. The last few seconds of footage are just corrupted or missing entirely. not because nothing was happening, but because the recording equipment itself gave out. This is already most of the answer, but your brain doesn't just go quiet. There's a phase that gets so much weirder. There's a phase most people have never even heard of. It's called hypnagogia, the transitional state between being awake and being asleep, stage 1 sleep. It can last a few seconds or a few minutes. Your cortex isn't fully offline yet. Your thalamus is starting to close the gate, but it hasn't shut completely. And in that weird in-between zone, your brain starts doing something deeply strange. It produces spontaneous, involuntary sensory experiences. Hallucinations, basically. Though that word sounds scarier than it needs to. Researchers who wake people up during this phase report the same things over and over. Geometric shapes drifting across your vision, sudden flashes of faces or places, the sound of someone calling your name, or a random scrap of music. And the classic one, the sudden sensation of falling, immediately followed by a violent, whole-body jerk that snaps you right back to alertness. That jerk is called a hypnic jerk, or a sleep start. 60 to 70% of people experience it. You know the one. You're just drifting off. Everything feels soft and heavy. And then, bam, you're falling off a ledge that isn't there. Your whole body convulses. You gasp. Your partner sits up half asleep and goes, "What is wrong with you?" And you just lie there thinking, "I have no idea." There's no definitive scientific consensus on exactly why it happens, but one popular theory says your brain is misreading the muscle relaxation of sleep onset as a loss of balance and fires a quick emergency correction signal. Another theory? It's a leftover from when our ancestors slept in trees. Sudden muscle relaxation would have been a real problem back then. A reflexive grab-and-catch response would have been useful. Whether that's true or not, the reflex clearly never got the memo that we moved indoors and started sleeping on flat mattresses. It still fires, and it still makes you look completely ridiculous. During this phase, the visual association areas of your cortex stay active, generating vivid imagery with no real visual input. Your temporal lobes, the ones involved in hearing, show heightened activity, which might explain why people sometimes hear words or sounds that aren't there. But here's the critical part. Most of us wake up the next morning with zero memory of any of this. Not because it didn't happen, it definitely happened, but because the brain's memory encoding systems were already shutting down while it was going on. The hippocampus, your brain's main structure for turning experiences into long-term memories, is in a transitional state during hypnagogia. Some research even suggests that N1 sleep is associated with increased forgetting, not memory formation. So you lived through a genuine hallucination, complete with geometric light shows and a dramatic false sensation of plummeting, and you remember none of it, every single night, without exception. What makes this even harder to wrap your head around is that the process isn't a clean, sharp line between awake and asleep. It's messy, gradual, and different parts of your brain don't all cross that threshold at the same time. Sleep researchers call the onset of sleep a local phenomenon. Different regions of the cortex can slip into something that looks like sleep, while other regions are still showing waking activity. You know that feeling when you catch yourself nodding off somewhere embarrassing? A lecture hall, a long meeting, your cousin's wedding? You sometimes have this vague impression that something was happening just before you jolted awake. Your motor cortex might have been more alert than your prefrontal cortex. Your ears might still have been picking up sounds while the front of your brain had already checked out. The exact moment of sleep onset, the moment you'd need to remember in order to remember falling asleep, isn't a single moment at all. It's a gradual, region-by-region shutdown. By the time the regions responsible for memory formation and self-awareness are going offline, the regions responsible for recording that transition have already stopped working. The observer is the last thing to go, and it goes before it can write anything down. It's like trying to film yourself falling asleep while holding the camera. Eventually, the hand holding the camera just relaxes. The camera falls, and the last few frames are just the ceiling spinning away as it hits the ground. Whatever happened in those final moments didn't get captured cleanly, and the camera definitely wasn't rolling when things finally went still. Now add this. Sleep itself doesn't particularly want you to hold on to the experience of falling asleep. Sleep is, among many other things, a memory consolidation process. During the night, your brain selectively strengthens certain memories from the day and quietly discards others. It's doing maintenance, keeping what it thinks will be useful, pruning what it doesn't. Research shows this process is highly selective. Sleep doesn't just blindly reinforce everything. It makes judgments about what's worth keeping. And the experience of transitioning into sleep itself, those dim, drowsy, fading final minutes of consciousness, from the brain's perspective, probably isn't high on the worth keeping list. It contains no actionable information, no emotional significance, no survival relevant content. It's just the feeling of lying in the dark getting progressively hazier. Your brain is basically a ruthless little editor, and it has collectively decided, across the entire human species, every night of recorded history, that the experience of falling asleep is content that ends up on the cutting room floor. Meanwhile, the hippocampus, which is key to forming new episodic memories, actually shows some interesting activity during the transition into sleep. Researchers believe it might be doing a kind of rapid memory processing, but these aren't new memories being formed. These might be recent memories being tagged, sorted, evaluated. The hippocampus during sleep onset is like the overnight editor going through the day's footage and deciding what makes it into the final cut. And the act of editing is not itself in the movie. Now let's add one deeper layer, a philosophical one that makes all of this feel a little unsettling. That gap in your consciousness happens every single night. 8 hours, gone, and you have absolutely no idea it's missing. You experience yourself as one continuous thread of awareness from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to bed. But that thread is broken every night, and you don't notice, because the part of you that would notice is the exact same part that goes offline. You are not present for roughly 8 hours out of every 24. And you have no felt sense of that absence, because feeling the absence of consciousness would itself require consciousness. The ancient Greeks already sensed something was off about this. Aristotle describes sleep as a state between living and not living. They associated sleep with Hypnos, the god of sleep, and his twin brother Thanatos, the god of death. Not because they thought sleep was dangerous, but because there was something philosophically troubling about the nightly suspension of the self. You go to sleep, and in some meaningful sense, you stop. Then something that claims to be you picks up right where things left off in the morning, with no direct memory of the gap. We're generally fine with this. We wake up feeling like the same person, memories intact, personality unchanged. The continuity feels preserved, even though there's a discontinuity baked into every single night. But the feeling of continuity and the fact of continuity are not quite the same thing. There's even a phenomenon called sleep state misperception, or paradoxical insomnia. People who are convinced they barely slept, who wake up certain they were awake most of the night. Yet objective measurements from sleep labs show they were asleep for perfectly normal amounts of time. Their EEG, the brainwave readout, says stage 1, stage 2, sometimes deeper, while their subjective experience insists, I was conscious the whole time. The brain can be in a measurable sleep state while the little narrator in your head is still running commentary, insisting it's awake, until even that narrator quietly steps away from the microphone, and the commentary just stops, and you don't notice, because you're asleep. So here's the complete picture. You can't remember falling asleep because it involves a cascading, overlapping series of processes that collectively destroy the conditions necessary for memory formation before you're even unconscious. Adenosine and melatonin tip the chemistry away from wakefulness. The hypothalamus flips the arousal system toward off. The thalamus closes the gate on sensory input. The hippocampus shifts away from encoding new experiences and starts its nightly maintenance. The prefrontal cortex, the part most responsible for self-awareness, for the sense of being a coherent self watching its own experience, is among the first regions to drop offline. And somewhere in all of that, the part of you that could have recorded the experience stops existing before the experience fully ends. The hypnagogic hallucinations come and go unremembered. The hypnic jerk fires and fades. Your brainwaves slow from alert beta through relaxed alpha into drowsy theta. And the entire transition happens without a witness. By the time you're fully asleep, every system that would have been needed to document the process of getting there has already been shut down. Every night, you essentially vanish. And you're okay with it because you always come back. Your brain decided a long time ago that this was a reasonable trade. 8 hours of absence in exchange for a repaired, consolidated, functional version of yourself the next morning. Memory of the transition was not included in the deal. And honestly, given how strange that transition actually is, the geometric hallucinations, the phantom ledge you keep falling off, the progressive regional shutdown of your own consciousness, maybe it's for the best that you don't remember it. You'd never get any sleep. So why can't you remember falling asleep? Because your brain starts shutting down its own recording equipment before it goes fully offline. Every night you essentially vanish, and that is a perfect design. Tonight, if you want, try to catch it. Watch for that hypnic jerk or those weird geometric shapes drifting behind your eyes. But honestly, you'll probably still forget the whole thing. If this made you think a little deeper about your own consciousness, hit that like button. And subscribe if you want me to keep asking the strange questions like this one. Want the next one? Why do we dream of falling? Or what actually happens in the 10 minutes after we die? Drop it in the comments. Sleep well, or at least try.